What if the cure for madness was worse than the disease itself? Hidden in the forgotten archives of France lies a dark chapter of medical history. One where doctors cut into the brains of patients, hoping to erase mental illness. But previously, it was experimented on apes as well. From children as young to the elderly, no one was spared. But what really happened to these patients? And why did France embrace such a controversial procedure? In this episode, we uncover the untold story of lobotomy's rise and fall in France. Using never-before-seen data from French, Belgian, and Swiss archives, we reveal the shocking details of this brutal surgery. What were the consequences for those who survived? And how did the world finally turn its back on this medical nightmare? The answers will leave you questioning the limits of science and humanity. What is lobotomy? The story of lobotomy begins not in a hospital, but at Yale University. In 1929, a young physiologist named John Farquhar Fulton became Yale's youngest professor. His mission? To unlock the secrets of the brain. Fulton's experiments focused on two chimpanzees, Lucy and Becky. After removing their frontal lobes, the chimps lost their ability to perform memory tasks. But what shocked researchers was their behavior. Once aggressive, they now seemed indifferent to failure. Fulton called it joining a happiness cult. This discovery would change everything. Fulton's work inspired Agus Moniz to pioneer human lobotomy. But at what cost? The answers lie ahead. Imagine a world where cutting into the human brain was seen as a cure. Doctors believed they could erase madness with a scalpel. This is not science fiction. This is the shocking reality of lobotomy, a medical procedure that promised hope but delivered horror. It all began in 1936. In the quiet halls of Lisbon, Portugal. Agus Moniz, a neurologist and politician, pioneered a radical new surgery, the lobotomy. His idea was simple yet terrifying: cut the white fibers in the brain's frontal lobes to cure mental illness. And for this, he was awarded the Nobel Prize in 1949. Yes, you heard that right. A procedure that left thousands of patients as mere shadows of their former selves was once celebrated as a medical breakthrough. But behind the accolades lay a dark truth. Lobotomy didn't cure madness, it destroyed lives. Patients were left emotionless, their personalities erased. Some became childlike, others completely dependent. And yet the world embraced it. The procedure quickly spread across Europe. In 1891, Swiss psychiatrist Gottlieb Burckhardt had already experimented with brain surgery on schizophrenic patients. But it was Moniz and his colleague, Almeida Lima, who turned it into a global phenomenon. But the story doesn't end there. Across the Atlantic in the United States, lobotomy found its most infamous advocate, Walter Freeman. Freeman took Moniz's procedure and simplified it. Using nothing more than an ice pick and a hammer, he performed lobotomies in non-sterile conditions, sometimes even in his office. His partner, James Watts, eventually left him, horrified by the crudeness of the procedure. By the 1940s, lobotomy had become a popular treatment in the US. Thousands underwent the procedure, often without fully understanding the risks. But by 1949, doubts began to surface. Critics argued that lobotomy did more harm than good, leaving patients permanently damaged. Today, lobotomy is a cautionary tale, a reminder of how far we've come and how far we still have to go. But the questions it raises about ethics, consent, and the limits of medical science are as relevant as ever. Francophone legacy of lobotomy, a hidden chapter in medical history. Using keywords like lobotomy, leucotomy, and psychochirurgy, researchers scoured databases and archives, uncovering 48 historic articles, 29 clinical series, and 6 doctoral theses. These documents reveal the stories of 1,340 patients, ranging from toddlers as young as 2.5 years old to elderly individuals aged 86, who underwent lobotomy. In 1939, France's mental institutions were overflowing, housing over 120,000 patients. With no effective treatments available, psychiatrists resorted to extreme measures: straitjackets, sleep therapy, and shock therapy. Lobotomy emerged as a desperate attempt to bring order to chaos. The reasons for performing lobotomy varied widely. From schizophrenia to severe anxiety, doctors saw it as a last resort for patients who had exhausted all other options. But was it truly a solution or merely an experiment? The procedure itself was as varied as its indications. Prefrontal lobotomy, or leucotomy, involved severing the frontal lobe's connections to the rest of the brain. Techniques ranged from radical cuts to partial sections, electrocoagulation, and even transorbital injections of radioactive iridium. Some patients were awake during the procedure, while others were under general anesthesia. The aftermath of lobotomy was often grim. Patients experienced mental confusion, apathy, and even dotage. Some rubbed their noses, mouths, and foreheads incessantly, a haunting reminder of the procedure's toll. While these symptoms often resolved within weeks, the psychological scars lingered far longer. The risks were undeniable. Seizures affected up to 23% of patients, while chronic headaches plagued 15%. Frontal syndrome, a vague but devastating condition, was frequently reported, and for some, the procedure was fatal, with death rates reaching as high as 5%. By 1950, the tide began to turn. At the 48th Psychiatry Congress in France, experts reviewed 10,000 lobotomy cases worldwide, a number later revealed to be a gross underestimate. In the US alone, 18,000 procedures had been performed. But as relapses mounted and critics grew louder, the medical community began to question the ethics and efficacy of lobotomy. Several factors fueled lobotomy's rise. The lack of antipsychotic drugs left psychiatrists with few options. Early reports, often anecdotal and exaggerated, painted lobotomy as a miracle cure. But as Feuillet noted in 1959, the quality of these studies was deeply flawed, raising serious ethical concerns. The final blow came in the 1950s with the introduction of chlorpromazine, the first antipsychotic medication. Suddenly, there was a safer, non-invasive alternative. Lobotomy fell out of favor, but its legacy remains. In the end, lobotomy was less a therapeutic strategy and more a desperate experiment. While it aimed to relieve severe neuroses and reintegrate patients into society, it often left them permanently altered, emotionally hollow, intellectually diminished. As antipsychotic medications emerged in the 1950s, lobotomy faded into obscurity, leaving behind a legacy of caution and controversy. But the story doesn't end here. What drove doctors to perform such radical procedures? And what lessons can we learn from this dark chapter in medical history? Stay tuned as we delve deeper into the minds behind the scalpel. This is Mystery Media, where the past's greatest mysteries are uncovered.